No mai haere mai, and welcome to Cult Chat, the podcast where we talk about coercion, control, and all things cultish. I'm Dr. Caroline Ansley. I'm a medical doctor. As a child, I lived at the Centrepoint community, a notorious cult in New Zealand, and now I run a website that advocates for the former children of the community.
I'm Liz Gregory, and I run the Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust, and I'm privileged to walk alongside people after leaving this group as they embark on their new lives.
And I'm Lindy Jacob. I'm a former member of the Exclusive Brethren, and I'm part of the Olive Leaf Network, a new initiative in Aotearoa to support leavers of high-demand religious groups.
Come with us as we unpack the cult playbook. We'll be talking to experts and leavers of coercively controlling groups, and we will call for Kiwis to cult-proof their lives.
Come with us as we traverse the cultiverse.
A warning, this podcast contains references to subjects and discussions which may be difficult for some people to hear. Please take care of yourselves and your whānau when listening.
Hi, Kaz here with my friend Anke Richter, who's the author of the fantastic book, Cult Trip. She's bringing us an exciting event this year.
Thanks, Kaz. Australasia, get ready for Decult 2024, the first cult awareness conference in New Zealand, happening in Christchurch this October. Are you worried about a friend or family member who's in a group that may be causing them harm, or do you have your own story? Then join us for a weekend with experts from around the world, where those who've left cultic groups can share their experiences and meet professionals who can help them. Head to our website, decult.net, for all the info.
Come cult-proof your life at Decult 2024. I'll be there. It's great to be here today in the studio with Liz and Lindy. We're about to listen to the interview I did with Sarah Mettrick. After that, I'll come back and we'll talk to Liz and Lindy and we'll have a chat about the interview. Okay, let's listen. Morena, welcome to our Cult Chat listeners and a very warm welcome to our guest today, Sarah Mettrick. Hello.
Kia ora, thank you.
Yeah. Sarah, could you introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a bit about yourself.
I live with my gorgeous fiance and I have a daughter, a dog and a cat. I do art, I run my own business and a bit of music.
Lovely.
Yeah.
That's not why you came in here, because of your interest in art and music. We have another reason for bringing you on the show today, don't we?
We certainly do.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I met Caroline through doing an article in The Listener with Anke regarding cults. And
Anke Richter.
Anke Richter, and trying to get support for cult leavers. I myself was in the Sri Chinmoy Centre for 11 and a half years.
And you were quite young at the time.
Yeah, so I started attending a free meditation workshop when I was 14 and then I became a member at 15.
Wow.
Until 27, yeah.
And it was around 10 years ago that you were involved.
Yes, I just had my 38th birthday on Monday, so a little over.
Golly, big chunk of your life.
Yeah.
Most listeners probably will know very little about Sri Chinmoy. Could you tell us a little bit about the group?
Sure. So Sri Chinmoy was a guru who I met in New York.
A guru?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sanskrit for spiritual teacher. And he was born in 1931 in Pondicherry. And he moved to New York, to the West, in 1964. And a few years afterwards, he started the Sri Chinmoy Centre and, gaining some influence and some members and followers.
In New York then at the time?
Yes. And then more centres began to develop and spread, and I think in the 80s it started in New Zealand and in the late 90s for Christchurch.
So late 90s. So where did you fit in that time scale?
I started attending classes 2000 and fully fledged member 2001.
You came into the group not long after it set up here in Christchurch.
Yeah, I know the Lotus Heart started in 97, which I think was the year that the centre also kicked off here.
Tell me about the Lotus Heart. Most people won't know what that is.
So the Lotus Heart currently exists on St. Street, and it's a vegetarian restaurant run by members of the centre. The staff wear saris and serve vegetarian food, and it has got quite a zen vibe. I know a lot of people go there, probably not aware that, the staff are quite underpaid. I myself, when I worked there, it was expected to do 2 hours of selfless service, which came under the philosophy of karma yoga. I was quite happy to do that at the time because I felt like that funded the free meditation workshops, which I felt was a really cool thing for society to learn. And then after you've done your 2 hours, then you got paid $7 an hour.
I don't expect that was keeping up with inflation.
It did actually go up to $10 an hour. But this was after the earthquakes. And basically after the earthquakes, the centres were really generous. We had a Lotus Hut in Cathedral Square in the old post office building and also on St. Asaph Street. And both of them, crumbled in the earthquake. And the international centres were really generous and they donated. I never knew the amount, but I think it was around $1 million. And the centre then bought outright the building they're currently in, and also I think another property that the members rent. And all of the members were asked to go on the unemployment benefit that was used as their wage at a $10 an hour rate. And then if you exceeded that, then you got a wee cash top-up.
Nice. So they weren't really paying anyone, really, if it was coming from the unemployment benefit?
Yeah, money was definitely, the purse strings were very tight. I remember a lot of the group members, they all went into my friend's granny's house who had just passed away. And I remember my friend, she left Christchurch because she was like, man, we just had no money. I'd even asked for money for tampons. It felt really humiliating.
Gosh, wow.
And then when I learned that they had sort of so much affluence, I felt pretty deceived, to be honest.
So we're digging it right into some of the problems with Sri Chinmoy, and I think we'll come back to that as we talk further. But you've given us a little bit of a picture already of what life was like for you as a 14 through to 24-year-old?
27.
27. Yeah. So 14 to 27. Okay, so that's a little bit about Sri Chinmoy in New Zealand and in Christchurch in particular. And just to be clear, it's still operational. There's still a group running here and the Lotus Heart's still running?
Yes. I mean, when Sri Chinmoy passed, it did change because he was obviously the central figure. But yeah, it's still operating as it is. I mean, I'm not really too involved. If you leave the group, then you're expected, you're not really allowed, the members aren't allowed to associate with you.
Well, so I've heard that before.
I've definitely lost touch with all the ins and outs, which I'm comfortable with.
Could you tell me and the listeners something about some of the key beliefs and ideologies of Sri Chinmoy in the group?
Yeah, so it has I guess the cornerstone philosophy is love, devotion, and surrender.
Surrender.
Yeah.
Problematic.
Yeah. And as in the public eye and how they promote themselves, and what drew me in is they're quite peace-loving people. We operate the World Peace Run and promote a lot of meditation, put on a lot of runs. Members are vegetarian, don't drink or smoke, and also live a celibate life as well. So it's, pretty clean living. But I guess the further you get involved, the more rules kind of start to emerge, such as no eye contact with males. you're not to go to weddings, not to go to the movie theatre, wear shorts like above the knee, and expose your shoulders, all the rest. So it gets quite interesting the more you dabble into it.
So there's rules there about how you dress. There's quite a lot of behavioural rules there. How you dress, how you interact with the opposite sex.
Yeah. No jeans, no wearing black.
And a quite a demure kind of expectation for women to be very modest.
Correct.
Is that expectation also placed on men? Did they have the same rules about clothing?
This is not. No.
Okay, so, all right, so that's...
Not surprising.
Not surprising, no. Patriarchy's present in the group.
Yes, in saying that though, like so under Sri Chinmoy, he's obviously at the top, and then there's centre leaders, and there were like a lot of prominent females within the group.
Yeah, okay. Any other beliefs that you wanted to mention or ideologies? What about the sort of spiritual stuff? Because you've talked about a lot of behaviour, clean living, being celibate, vegetarians. You mentioned the idea of surrender. And you also talked about running, which I find quite interesting. We'll come back to that.
Oh, yeah.
But what about some spirituality concepts? Talked about meditation.
Yeah, there's a lot of meditation. We did group meditations twice a week, classes 2 or 3 times a week. There's I mean, I could run you through a typical day.
I'm going to ask you that.
And then that will kind of...
Yes, okay.
And we can elaborate on it.
What was a day in the group like for you?
You meditate at 6 a.m. However, I started work at either 6 or 6:30. So I'd get up...
In the Lotus?
At the Lotus Hut, yes. So I would, before you even place your feet on the ground, you're to say, Supreme, I bow to thee 3 times, and then place your feet on the ground. From there, you freshen up, sit at your shrine, which has a transcendental, which is Sri Chinmoy's photograph, and he's kind of meditating, and his eyes are half open, and you're to focus on his third eye.
So when you say supreme, that supreme eye, is that Sri Chinmoy that you're...
So no and yes. So the Supreme was the name Sri Chinmoy gave to God. Right. I wasn't at all really into the God idea when I came along. I'm from an atheist background, but I did grow to enjoy the warmth and the feeling of expansion within me when I did it.
Expansion.
And I also, I guess because there's meditating on his photo, which I kind of refused to do the first few times, but then I got into it. Also with meeting him and all the people around him, I thought they were all pretty dope.
Pretty dope.
So you meditate for ideally half an hour, but given I had kind of swift morning routine, I do more 20 minutes, and then we do morning songs. The invocation is a must.
Invocation?
Yeah, it's about a 5-minute song to the Supreme. And then there's a handful of other songs. If you're going to do the full daily list, it takes about an hour and a half. So I'd probably do about 6 English and Bengali songs.
And this is by yourself or with others?
Yeah, my personal meditation.
By yourself, okay. Yep.
Yeah. And then from there, I would quickly chuck on my sari, and then quite awkwardly put my track pants over it so I could bike, which wasn't very cool.
Was everyone required to wear sari?
If they worked in one of they were called Divine Enterprises.
Okay. So that's only when you're going to work?
Yes.
Okay.
And also the members-only meditation, but otherwise we'd wear, we called them westerns, not cowboy clothes, but or civvies. Just incognito clothes, so we didn't intimidate people. But yeah, then I'd meditate, you meditate a minute before and after driving or biking, do that, get to work, and then sit down and do whenever you work at an enterprise, you've got to sit down and do 5 minutes of meditation before beginning. So you're definitely feeling like your vata, or your spiritual energy is pretty high. And then, get into work. I'd work till about 2:30. And from there, I'd normally get my training in because, as I mentioned, we did a lot of running. And also to go to a cleaning job. That's how I earned proper money so I could go to New York twice a year and another trip around Christmas time. So do 3 quite cool international trips that I did really enjoy. And then from there it was back home, quick shower, and back to the centre for whatever we had on, one of the projects or centre meetings. And I'd normally go to about 9, and then it's like we would, I guess, use the technique, if it was a class, of giving seekers a really hot cup of herbal tea and then sit down with them. And, like, I guess having been in a cult yourself, you can kind of sniff out potential members.
So that's the recruiting.
This is the recruiting, have a wee chat and go from there.
Were there rules around how you spoke to seekers, as you call them?
Yeah, definitely. We would switch our language. So between us, we were disciples and guru was guru, whereas to seekers, they were, students or members of the group and our spiritual teacher. So there definitely was a bit of like
you're toning down the language.
Insider and outsider kind of language.
Mm-hmm. As you've been talking, you've dropped in lots of inside language, lots of it. Yeah.
Yeah, if I need to elaborate.
No, we'll ask you.
Let me translate.
Yeah. We know that the use of inside-outside language is a very key part of high control groups.
Isn't it? I just finished, actually, 1984 by George Orwell.
Right.
Which is very much, they've got their speak-think language. And I found it really interesting at the end. He finally stopped resisting Big Brother. If you don't know the book, it's written in the 50s.
I've never read it.
Oh, it's a total classic, like political one. But he finally he feels complete because he's stopped resisting the regime, and has finally surrendered to the will of the group, and he feels totally fulfilled, which is obviously written as a real warning against these groups. Yeah.
He'd be good in Sri Chinmoy, wouldn't he? All that surrendering.
He would. He'd do very well.
So you've mentioned what the day looked like. I'm curious to know whether you were living with other members or whether you were living independently.
So I guess given what my salary was and how often we travelled, I lived in with other members, which I did enjoy. But I guess we didn't really have a lounge. That was a bedroom. And then the cupboard, which should have been a cupboard, was also a bedroom. Well, it wasn't a cupboard, but kind of was.
It's a bit of overcrowding.
A wee bit, yeah. But I always had my own room, and I genuinely enjoyed the sisterhood, and I'm still...
only woman?
Yes, segregated. Right. We weren't making eye contact with the males, but that didn't stop you from looking at their muscular forearms.
Or calves even.
Yes, or running behind them and overtaking them.
Yeah, good. Yes, you'd have a good look at their back end, wouldn't you? Yeah. Okay, so you've talked a little bit already about the things that you enjoyed about the group, because these groups, they always have something good, right? No one joins a cult. No one joins something that ends up, it doesn't look like what they end up leaving, what they join.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So there's always pull factors, things that make you go in there or draw you in, that attract you. You've mentioned some of them. You said, the peace, you said warmth, expansion, talked about clean living. What are some of and the communal living with the woman. What are some of the other things that initially drew you in?
Definitely that. I think, at the time I was at high school, so quite self-involved to say the least. And it felt like a reprieve from kind of to go for something that was bigger than myself, to kind of join this movement that, the people in the group, they're all genuinely feeling that they're, well, I can only speak for myself, but you do really feel like you're part of this movement that's about creating world peace, that your consciousness is going to be the thing that creates ripples of change. So that kind of energetic thing.
It's powerful.
It is. And
purposeful.
100%. And the people that are drawn to that, and, if you wear a sari and you go against mainstream society, you are really stigmatized and ostracized, looked at and asked weird questions about your sex life, and it's not very nice. I didn't like it. Yeah, I just found it really rude, actually.
Yeah.
And I think, like, you know, like, if you do meet people who are doing this, just they're humans.
Yeah.
And you know, like, I've been guilty of it myself. I've looked at, you know, the Gloria Veil. People think, oh, what are they thinking? And then I'm like, oh my God, like, you of all people should know.
Yeah, exactly.
I think also the other pull factors, to bring it back, were I loved the travel.
Yeah, you're going to New York twice a year. New York's a fantastic place to go to.
Well, yes, although, like,
You wouldn't have seen some of the fantastic
I had a legally rented basement. We all paid board for like a bunk, and it had a leak in it, so it wasn't. And it was in Jamaica, Queens, which is a little bit probably stabby is the word that comes to mind. You know, like, the travel was amazing. The people are inspiring. The meditation, and then as part of the World Peace Run, where I got to run all around Eastern Europe, meet with mayors, go to schools, teach kids to meditate. I did things that I wouldn't have otherwise done. We did a lot of, like, plays and heaps of performances. Like, we even went to Woodstock and did a concert, and I got to play my piano and sing. And then the running. Is this a good time to go into the running?
Yeah, tell me about the running. Do tell me about the running. Because this is a bit different. I've never heard of groups that focus on running.
Yeah. So we had Sri Chinmoy started the Sri Chinmoy Marathon team, and they put on a lot of races, including the world's longest foot race, which is 3,100 miles, which translates as 5,000 And for 7 years, I helped at that race. So I spent the whole summer there helping a woman and also cooking food for it.
Where is this?
New York, Queens.
Yeah.
And I myself I did a lot of marathons, at least 20. I got into ultra running. I guess within the group there was a bit of status if you're a good runner, and that also in turn brought attention to the group.
Yeah, because Sri Chinmoy was valued running, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you're being more like the leader and you're following his values.
Yes.
Of course you get kudos for that.
Yeah. And yeah, so I did a lot of marathoning, and I built up to ultras. I found I had I was quite good at the 12-hour walk, which starts at like 7 p.m. and goes to 7 a.m. and it's around a 1-mile loop. And I just loved it. I did whatever miles it is to make 90K in 12 hours. So I was definitely like, this is my thing, because I struggled with running, but I did go on to do a 6-day running race in Flushing, Queens, which was just in a park near the Unisphere where they have the US Open. And that was just, you set up a tent and ran as much as you could in that time. It did bring about like a real euphoria, probably real highs and definitely some lows.
Was those euphorias used in the group? Because like these experiences that enable us to kind of disconnect a bit from our reasoning and our critical thinking, like meditation, like chanting, runner's euphoria. It's interesting. Do you think those were used as a way
absolutely.
to
Yeah. Hypnotic techniques,
yes,
meditation,
absolutely.
singing, chanting, prayer, all of them we used.
to control is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I guess in hindsight, but I was just really into the vibe.
Of course. Reflecting back, do you see any way that they were used to control?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, critical thought was discouraged, and that was used through means of, for example, I was told not to, and actually we were all encouraged not to look up Sri Chinmoy on the internet, and that would be absolute poison for our spiritual life.
Yes, information
so that's
control.
what I mean by
information control,
critical thought, in terms of not having the information.
And meditation itself is a way of shutting down thought.
Exactly. Also, how do I put it? It was like spiritual bypassing. You had to be, if you're feeling doubtful or negative, you needed to be more grateful, like that was on you. So like I would find myself chanting if I got myself, like having doubts or
to shut them
not
off.
Being humble enough by accepting my centre leader's word. I'd be angry about it, but then I'd, try to be humble. I was told that I was never humble enough often, and it definitely brought me to tears in front of the group quite a few times because of my lack of humility.
Lack of humility, or maybe speaking up for yourself. Or depends how you frame it, really, doesn't it?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, speaking up for yourself, demanding more, maybe.
I'd challenge the odd thing. For example, with the going on the unemployment benefit for as your wage, I moved to a different centre. I moved to the Brisbane Centre.
You were moved?
I chose to move.
Yeah.
Because I still believed in the group. And
so why did you make that move? Because the unemployment benefit thing?
I struggled with a lot of the decisions that my centre leader made. And I think, when you're with a group for so long, the politics can weigh you down. And I guess it was hard because Sri Chinmoy had passed away and we couldn't verify things. So he put her in charge, so her word went.
So we have already talked a little bit about these things, but could we dig in a little bit more to the things that made it hard for you to stay? The things about Sri Chinmoy that became harder and harder to tolerate and ignore over time and eventually led to you leaving?
The truth is, I genuinely had, quite goodwill towards Sri Chinmoy, and I, when he passed away, I flew to New York and stood in front of his open casket, and I cried a lot. I definitely grieved him. But then, within all the kind of rules he had created for his followers, I definitely had some struggles. To be fair, I only talked to Sri Chinmoy once as well. So I had...
But you spent some time with him in New York each visit?
Yes, and he would sort of sit in his little temple and just sort of talk to the group, and we'd come up and do performances and that kind of a thing. And I'd read his books and things.
Yeah. So the things that were making it hard for you to stay in the group?
Definitely a big one for me was my sexuality. I kind of hated it, but I couldn't overcome what was called the vital energy, or your lower energy centres, aka sex drive.
You couldn't overcome your sex drive?
I could not, and it was very...
That's a shame.
I felt a lot of shame, to be fair. Quite a lot of guilt as well.
Of course. Shame and guilt, they're the best things to use against people.
Yeah, I would masturbate and I would feel really bad. I felt like it affected my consciousness and that people would feel it. I'd have to wash all my clothes, and my centre leader was quite manipulative in the fact that she told me that she could read my thoughts, and that she even told me that I was... a cat in my past, and I don't know, just made strange comments about me being quite unevolved. Yeah, it definitely eroded my self-esteem.
Absolutely.
Which made me pretty compliant.
Well, the whole point is to break down who you are as a person and 100%. Build you up as a member of the group, give you a new identity, the group identity. So this was all about systematically destroying your own identity.
Yeah, which sucks.
It sucks, but you're telling me that's what was happening.
I think, yeah. I mean, I couldn't help but kind of be curious about, what had happened in the decade of the 2000s. I guess I had that kind of awkwardness where I left the Christchurch Centre, which was really frowned upon, and then I came back and I was just trying to make the centre work for me. I couldn't do it in Christchurch working at the enterprise. I worked in a different enterprise overseas, and then I thought, look, I'll come back and I'll get an outside job. My sister had a restaurant and she kindly employed me, even though I had zero wine knowledge, at her bar or restaurant. And I was commuting into the centre. I had read a book in my travels from my mum and dad's bookshelf, actually 2 books that had really incited a lot of doubt in me. One was Mal's Last Dancer, and the other one was Wild Swans.
I've read that too. Both great books.
Yes. So I had read about...
Leaving communism
regime, and a lot of it, I could draw a lot of parallels. Yeah. And I made the mistake of mentioning to one of the members who I thought I could tell her, but I said, oh my goodness, I can't help but draw parallels between Madame Mao and her regime and, this prominent person in our centre. And because of the culture common in like most cults, I was reported on.
Of course.
I found myself coming up, I'd, drive in to the meditation for the centre nights. I'd take our prasad, which is like we'd, in front of the shrine, we'd lay tables of food and take it with our right hand, bless food, and then eat it sort of as like light.
That was a ritual that you had to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the prasad room, it was kind of more relaxed than the formal meditation room, and sort of like no one really sat with me. So in some ways,
I see. So the message about you being problematic had already spread.
Correct.
Yeah, and you were being you were being rejected.
Yeah, I'd already kind of had obviously one foot out the door because I was no longer in the group.
The social control.
And when I finally made the call that I was going to leave, my centre leader said, well, you can do whatever you want in this group. Like, you can just keep it quiet. And I was kind of like, what the? Yeah. Like, I don't do things like that. Like, I'm pretty sincere about how I do things. I don't want to just pretend, and I'm pretty sincere. I want to leave right now.
So that's an example to me of what it appears to be that you joined. At the beginning, you were talking about all these wonderful things, clean living and group meditation and peace. As you went through, it's becoming clear that it's not quite what it looked like.
Well, certainly not.
And I'm interested in the celibacy thing. Like that. How? I mean, did you hear that others weren't celibate? I mean, was this a rule that applied to only some people?
It applied to everybody.
But did it actually?
Actually, no, it didn't. I heard about others having some sex, and I was a little bit jealous, if I'm honest.
Of course.
I mean,
it's a big thing to sacrifice.
Yeah. There were married couples, and the thing is, the celibacy also was a precursor to no children, which...
Of course, no, we don't want kids. We don't want kids if you're a guru because they distract.
This is not a powerful workforce if you're busy with the babies.
Exactly. Yeah, don't need kids. Were the marriage or spousal relationships chosen for you, or did people get to choose their own partners?
I think in the really early days, Sri Chinmoy did that, but this is kind of, I guess, when he was forming the group in the 60s and 70s. He did choose some divine marriages. I think he might have even, I don't know for sure, but I think Carlos Santana got married to Mahalakshmi was her spiritual name. We all had...
Are these key figures somewhere?
Carlos Santana, so Sri Chinmoy had a lot of famous group members. Okay. John McLaughlin.
I'm just revealing my ignorance.
That's all right. We're cult kids. It's fine. Do you know Roberta Flack?
Vaguely.
Strumming my pain.
Okay.
Yeah. She's actually gorgeous. She came to Christchurch to do a concert and she met with us. I made her smoothies. She was like, I know you. And I was like, oh, probably from New York. But yeah, he had a lot of prominent members, as well as met with a lot of really prominent figures like Gorbachev and Princess Diana, because he had a meditation group in the United Nations.
Yes, I read that he was, he was quite influential.
Yes.
Wow.
And there were heaps of really cool people I met with, like Carl Lewis, and it definitely added, I think Quincy Jones is a member.
I could see why, as a young person, that would just feel like you're on the edge.
So much cooler than high school.
Oh, yeah, very much cooler than high school. So we're jumping around a bit here. There's a few things I want to come back to. But seeing as we've just recently talked about the celibacy thing,
yes,
I just want to kind of go into that a little bit more. High demand or culty groups always seem to need to control the sexuality of their members, as if it's too powerful a force to be allowed to run unchecked. And I've been reading this book called The Guru Papers, and they've got a whole section in the book on sexual manipulation and gurus. and I'm going to read a few quotes out and see if any of these identify with you. Sex is so basic that ideology alone is not strong enough to control it. Fear and guilt must also be used as a control mechanism of repression. Then later, the author says, in the realm of sexuality, the two prevalent ways control is exerted are through promulgating either celibacy or promiscuity. Although seemingly opposite, both serve the same function. They minimise the possibilities of people bonding deeply with each other, thus reducing the factors that compete with the guru for attention. And then later, celibacy, or at least the image of it, is the easiest route for a guru to obtain the power of being the central emotional focus for large numbers of people. Celibacy allows one to maintain a certain kind of control of one's energy and emotions. It also conforms with the images of purity. Therefore, it is far easier for a guru to gain and maintain power if he is celibate, or at least pretends to be. How is sex used?
So, I mean, obviously for the bulk of us, we were celibate. And there's a inner circle, of which I was not privy to. And I guess this is where it gets quite divided, and hence we were encouraged not to Google Sri Chinmoy. Now you can quite comfortably Google Sri Chinmoy, unless you put it in quotations with cult and abuse, and then you'll find, like papers and papers of testimonies from really close disciples of his about his alleged sexual misconduct with them. I've spoken with one of the women, and I belong to a group where we openly discuss it. It's quite divisive. Obviously, members are on the side that it definitely didn't happen, but most are oblivious to it, as I was. And it took me, so when I finally left, I just had enough of all the politics. And I left, and I was just so excited that I could have so much fun. And I reached out. I saw that there was a member on Facebook, which is like super taboo.
Taboo.
Yeah, I messaged, sent him a message, and he said that he had been wanting to leave for quite a few years and that he was trying to find his own flat. And I was like, oh, so do you want to hang out? So we did, and we married within a year. He left the group. And about a year after I left, my friend, I actually had Googled Sri Chinmoy, but I didn't find anything that was particularly...
While you were in the group or out? After?
Well, after I'd left. I didn't find anything that controversial, to be honest. I didn't really bother with it. And I was still kind of inwardly quite... Yeah, I loved having my freedoms, but I still believed in my teacher and that kind of a thing. I still had like a few photos and things. One of my friends, really brave, I would say heroic woman, she left a year after me, and as my genuine friend told me that there was a lot of alleged allegations around Sri Chinmoy. And I read them and I was kind of shocked, and it took me about a week to come to grips with it, to be honest. I wanted to kind of just invoke some cognitive dissonance and not feel like over a decade of my life was wasted, and that, everyone who just saw me as a stupid follower, that I was actually that person, that I'd been manipulated. Like, it was a really hard thing to face. But I think in doing it, it gave me a lot of freedom. But within our little group, because I guess it was a few years after Sri Chinmoy died, like in New Zealand, kind of like the cool people all left. And we had like a little expat flat. And
expat from Sri Chinmoy.
Yes, in Mount Eden, there were 4 of us, and there was like another couple who lived down the road. And we just really awkwardly went to clubs and didn't probably interact that well.
So you found some people who had the same lived experience who are now out.
Yes.
To sort of support you in the rehabilitation? Was it a useful
thing? It was just people we knew and could relate to, because we were probably so unrelatable for the average person. But within that group, most of them sided with, they knew about the allegations and said they were utter lies and that these people were attention seekers and that definitely didn't happen. And it was really difficult because here's the man I love. This was my husband. He definitely didn't believe in it.
Okay.
And within our friend group, I wasn't really able to speak my mind about it. They'd often talk about Guru and I sort of shut down a bit and I tried to talk to him about it, but he had his own opinion on it. And
so even though you had left the group and you were with people who had left the group, there was still a holding to a lot of the beliefs.
This is correct.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until it's a really sad story because Aaron and I, we were really in love. We had a baby together, which is Evie. And when she was 1, he got terminally diagnosed with cancer and passed away when she was 3. And from that point on, I guess my universe felt like it fell apart. I was grieving heavily and become a single parent. I fear a widow. Like, I did get the sole parent benefit, which was amazing, but it is definitely hard to, I guess you don't get child support or that kind of a thing. Like, it was definitely really challenging to sell a house really quickly, and I bought a caravan, moved to Golden Bay, but this was also, I guess, in some ways for me, the beginning of, without such a kind of strong husband who really, I took a lot of social cues from him because I hadn't really integrated in society. So like, I'd be like, does this look cool to wear? Or like, what music do you listen to? He was from Hamilton, so some of it was, I shouldn't say misguided, but it gave me a broader view of lots of sides of life, which is cool. But this was kind of, this period was where I had the freedom to find out who I was.
Hello, you're listening to Cult Chat. It's great to be here to dissect that interview with Sarah. So, what did you think about that, Lindy?
Oh, wow. I found that so fascinating. And I'm so grateful to her for coming on and sharing, especially when this group is still active, right? It always takes a lot of courage to do that. But, the first thing that stood out to me was that she was 14 when she began to get involved. 14, it's so young. It's so young. You're still at school. You're still, she was still living in her parents' home. And, it wasn't like she moved in there and was fully recruited and fully indoctrinated at 14. But, yeah, it just fascinated me that was when the slow journey began that was going to take her to that place. And, yeah, that was kind of scary because I thought, loads of 14-year-olds are out there beginning to take steps towards independence, get involved with hobbies and interests. And how can we give 14-year-olds tools to be mindful of what they're doing?
Yeah, that's that whole concept about recruitment, that people don't join cults. They join what they think is something positive. It's going to
that's right.
add some value to their life. It might align with some of their values already, and they choose to begin a journey, but it never ends up like that.
Yes, she talked about being attracted by the peace-loving stuff and that they were into running and things like that. Like, those are all wonderful things.
Great things, the idealism. Again, I guess what always strikes me when you do an interview with an ex-cultist, and it's in another sphere, this is the sort of mystic spirituality side, and we've done interviews with people who've been involved in all kinds of other different variations of religious groups. It's just the similarity in the behaviours. So again, she just touches on the word surrender.
Oh, surrender.
The think-speak language, the critical thought being discouraged, that you're never humble enough, the eroding of your self-esteem, the reporting in the group. These are all these sociological behaviours that are so damaging, and Janya Lalich talks about them. These are these systems of control and influence.
Yes, and I love that she mentioned 1984. I only read that book a couple of years ago, and it's actually a really disturbing book. It doesn't have a good ending, which is distressing. It's a really disturbing book.
Cults don't either.
Yeah,
and cultic groups, people who are involved in them. There's not good ending.
But again, so fascinating that book was written decades ago about political control and social systems, and how it just fascinates me, because I know someone who left the Brethren after reading that book, because they were just like, what the heck, how can this book written about politics so many decades ago exactly describe the social context that I'm part of? And here's somebody in another group going, oh my gosh, it exactly describes what I'm part of. So do go read 1984, but prepare for, like, it's not pretty. Yeah,
entirely. I was just struck, and I'm sure our listeners were too. Here is an example of what looks like utter exploitation of the workforce.
Oh, yeah.
Right here in the heart of Christchurch.
Yeah.
Underneath the noses of everyone.
Yeah.
They call them divine enterprises. So that's their way of saying it's our religious way of volunteering and our service to our religion and our ideology.
So finding spiritual language to justify the exploitation.
That's right.
Yeah, that was really disturbing. Yeah, so it was a restaurant, right? And she talked about how the money was going to the top, somewhere to the leaders, but for those who were at the bottom, the workers, that they were being severely underpaid for years and years, and all sorts of sort of slightly dodgy employment things going on too, by the sounds it sounded, with around COVID and benefits and all this sort of thing. So,
and she said, when I discovered there was affluence in the Sri Chinmoy
that's right.
group, I felt pretty deceived, to be
Yeah,
honest.
it shocked her, because there are people, it's the same, we hear about it in a bunch of other groups that are here in New Zealand, where there's wonderful people at the bottom of the food chain who are really genuinely laying themselves out for the ideal. They're suffering for the ideal. They're getting up early. They're working late. They're
attending to their own
needs, giving over of themselves. Again, to pick another novel by the same author as 1984, Animal Farm, the workhorse Baxter, working himself to death for the ideal, for the vision, and at the end of the day being sold for horse meat. You know, nothing comes back to the Baxters. Nothing comes back to the Baxters.
And you're being sold for horse meat in these groups is you put your head up and express any discontent, you're gone, you're out, you've lost your place of living, because they were living together in sort of flatting situations.
You've lost your favour with God too. You've lost your favour with God.
Not just your employment.
No.
That's right, with their master. And it was really interesting to do an interview with someone who, with the ideology, was around the peace-loving, meditation, clean living, celibacy, vegetarianism, the love and devotion to the Supreme.
Yeah, I was struck by Sarah she wasn't bitter, and I know that word is used a lot
in cult.
in Gloriavale, is she actually had a lot of sort of warmth still. She'd retained a lot of warmth towards her time there. She wasn't angry, bitter, resentful, and I think this is probably part of her character, that she said herself, she's quite a chirpy kind of person.
She carried hurt for sure.
Yeah.
And there will be anger there. Anger's your secondary emotion. And I like, Lindy, something you've said recently, is that it's okay to be angry if there's this unbound injustice, and especially an ongoing injustice. And I'm sure she has those days and those moments, and they're good emotions to have. And so you do, and a former member rides a wave of emotion.
And it is complex, because there were some good memories for Sarah around particularly around the communal living with a bunch of other women, because men had to live separately, and she talked about some of the beauty and the warmth in those relationships.
The sisterhood.
She talked about, I came to enjoy the warmth and the expansion within me. I just thought that was quite lovely, the way she described that.
But again, that just reminds us and our listeners that always with these groups, they're complex. They're not all bad, or no one would join them and no one would stay in them. There are elements of good in there as well.
And they're just the same elements of good that are
anywhere.
In any group, that you can get that feeling.
You can get that anywhere else in a safe environment that's not also exploitative of you.
The choir was involved in. There's this amazing group of sort of 100 and whatever women, and there was a feeling of a sisterhood and a togetherness.
There was in my women's female sports fighting gym too. It was an awesome sisterhood as we punched each other up.
But what you didn't have in there were the techniques for control, and you didn't have the guilt and the shame, and you didn't have the spiritual bypassing, and you didn't have all of these other things that come in with these groups that actually destroy the inner you. She said something about she stopped resisting the regime and submitted to the will of the group. And that's what happens. That's the indoctrination program that comes out in what we colloquially call brainwashing. It's actually where the person just submits to the will, because the external features of control and the rules get tighter and tighter around you, and you realise that if you leave this safety of this, even though this is hard, you're going to lose everything.
Yeah, and she talked about that, how at the outset it was just meditation classes and then working for them and things like that. But she talked about how the deeper you went in, the more and more the rules began to come in, rules around your dress, rules around your time, rules around your sexuality.
Oh, and the stuff about the control of women. It's like, why is it always that these
Control of
groups
women
actually
and
have
control of sexuality.
Yeah, I mean...
Time and finances.
Yeah, I know, but why is it, like she said, no eye contact with the males, that the woman had to dress demurely, that, the celibacy thing was controlled, that and it's just like, why...
Meanwhile, the founder's quite free to have sex with whoever he likes, wasn't he? Or am I getting mixed up with the multiple other gurus that are out there?
I think that's always reasonably
Well, she does
common.
go on to talk about...
She does.
She talks about this in the second episode.
Okay, so we'll have to go on to listen to that. The other thing that I found fascinating, I always find it fascinating, again, the overlay of the spirituality and faith aspect of it. And I think I find that interesting because sometimes people ask us with Olive Leaf Network, why do we support people who leave high demand religious groups? Why have we got this religious thing in there? And I always say, well, because actually the power of religion and spirituality is an immense force in people's lives for good or for bad. And because it is so powerful, it's a favourite tool of people to use, to weaponise and exploit. And so I found that fascinating, that because sometimes people say, meditation and yoga and stuff, some of it for people isn't spiritual. Some people, I've been to some yoga classes once and it was more just around the stretching and the physical side of it, and there are some people who say it's not spiritual, and then there are others for whom meditation and all that sort of thing is connected to spirituality. And it sounds like for her, she talked about how they sang songs that were invocations to the Supreme, that they had a shrine and had these daily practices of prayer that began at 6 a.m. every day. You had to do your daily devotions. And again, it fascinates me, because she talked about there being a photo of Sri Chinmoy.
She resisted.
And it fascinates me when people, there's a conflation of a guru with the divine, like that there was this concept for her of the Supreme, referring to a deity, but then actually at the centre of the shrine was a picture of a human being, this guru, this leader, and that they are being conflated with the divine.
It wasn't clear to me who was the divine.
Exactly, who was the Supreme. And so it ends up, if you're praying before a shrine with a picture of Sri Chinmoy, that he becomes... he has the power of the divine, which fascinates me.
The messenger. It's always the messenger, the conduit, the intermediary.
Growing up in the Brethren, we were not allowed to have a cross or a picture of Jesus up anywhere on the wall, but every household in their lounge, their main living room, had to have a photo of Bruce Hales had to have a photo of each of the historical leaders. Everyone had to have it. 7 leaders on the wall. Oh, but don't you dare hang up a cross.
Were they the 7 stars in Jesus' hand?
No, like Howard.
Hopeful Christian.
He believed he was a star in the hand of Jesus or something. Anyway, the point is that it's fascinating when people, it just happens time and time again, they get a guru or a human leader, right? They conflate them with God. That gives them ultimate power and authority over a person's life, and away you go.
That's exactly what you want if you're a leader of a cult, to be conflated with God, because you have the ultimate authority.
Yes.
You can't go any higher.
Isn't it interesting, even in communist regimes, various dictators have risen up to being the godlike
status.
Unreal,
like to the point of being embalmed, some of them, and then their dead body being worshipped.
I've seen the Korean one.
Have
What's his name?
Have you really?
What's his name?
You've seen it in person. I can't remember his name, but I did once go down a big rabbit hole of researching the embalming and how...
we walked when I was in Vietnam.
And revered.
Fascinating.
Well, I've seen the Egyptian,
Oh, yeah?
mummified
Oh, wow.
pharaohs who kind of,
as well?
they were
Deified
risen
as
up
well.
to say some of that. But again, the communist link.
She was reading Mao's Last Dancer and Wild Swans, which is all about the communist regime and the control there and her identification with that.
I just cried and cried at Mao's Last Dancer. Powerful movie. Yeah, and especially because years later he is reunited with his parents.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which just made me cry because it was just
All right, read the book, guys.
No, watch the movie. It's an amazing movie.
There are a few things she talked about in this episode around when you start to come to the realisation that this group might not be as healthy or it might not be what it seems to be, that it involves you potentially admitting that a decade of her life was wasted.
Yes,
How
say that.
difficult that is to reconcile, and some people use that as an excuse to remain in the group even longer because they can't face it. I find that just such a devastating thought. The stigma of even having joined a cult as well that you carry with you.
So she described that group of friends who were still holding to the beliefs even though they'd left. And that she was married to someone who she very much loved, but he still held to those ideals. And it wasn't until after he died that she was able to start to think differently.
Dismantle the shrine and all that sort of thing. Was it take away the photos or...
Yeah, she talked about needing the freedom to find out who I was, and so that involves some space for her. And often people coming out of these groups actually need space.
And it wasn't, because if you think about it, her husband died, and then it wasn't until she had a 3-year-old, I think it was, that she said she went on to benefit, I think, because he died when she was 3. So that was 3 to 4 years after she'd come out of the group, I think, because the child was born after.
That's right. Yeah,
and it
a period of time.
Yeah, it was that different period of where she had a break as she was a solo parent, and so that just says to me, that it does take a long time to deconstruct after you've left the group.
Definitely. Well, I'm really interested in listening to the next part of the episode. So make sure you join us for the next episode of Cult Chat, where we'll listen to the next part of Sarah Mettrick and we'll have another discussion again about the contents. Thanks for joining us today. Head to our social media platforms, spread the word. Thanks to Plains FM for having us in the studio here as well. We appreciate all they do for Cult Chat. See you, everyone.
Ka kite anō.
If anything in today's episode was difficult or upsetting for you and you would like to talk to somebody, we encourage our New Zealand listeners to free call or text 1737 for support from a trained counsellor. Or you might like to visit the resources section of the Olive Leaf Network website, where you can find a range of organisations and resources that might be able to support you. We would also like to remind you that the views and thoughts and opinions that have been expressed in this program are the speakers alone, and Cult Chat does not necessarily endorse or share them.